experience of lifting and being lifted are two very different experiences, you know. Both have their forms of humility, but each form in itself is different. So, you know, there's a certain humility to, you know, we have free food and we give food, and or going into the prisons or something like that. There's a certain kind of humility that one enters with, and if you do it well, yes, if you do it well, it's the humility where you're indistinguishable as one of when you enter any location, you know. And I often talk about the fact that you know, I don't know that anybody will ever be a citizen of any location that wasn't their original location, but to do your best. And what an honor it is when any group of, to recognize that it's an honor when any group of people welcomes you in. And I'm on my fifth time living in Harlem, and I feel like it's really, you know, the past two times have been the times where I've been invited into the heart of Harlem, you know. And when I walk home, I walk home inside of a mandala, and I walk home inside of just a glorious, almost unimaginable reality. The reality that I was looking for when I was 27 and doing a lot of LSD, you know, it just exists right there. It just exists right there where one might least expect it, like those stories where they talk about the gold was always under your bed. So, so that's a certain kind of humility. And then there's this other kind of humility, and that's the humility of being knocked down. And then that, you know, having to put your hand out to be lifted back up. And I feel like, you know, we talk about these cycles of samsara and the wheel of samsara, and I feel like that's the wheel of experiential compassion, is really giving the hand out and getting the hand up. And really continually putting yourself out there so that you're brought down, and that being brought down is seen as a benefit or a success in your path. That right at that moment where you're just, I got this nailed, you know, and it's like, and we've got you nailed. And then you go down into the underground, and then you rise back up as the humble gardener. And, you know, that's the mythology that's in our culture. And people often see that as a martyred mythology. I don't. I mean, I don't think people follow the end of the Christian story. Again, I talk a lot about various religions. I love them all. I welcome everyone to explore all of them. I'm not any of them. Although I do have a special kind of relationship with Buddhism, but non-exclusive. Yes, I'm non-monogamous. Non-monogamous. And so, you know, people often say like, oh, the martyrdom of Christianity. It's like, no, the success story of Christianity. That to be brought into the underworld and then to meet these energies, that probably the energies that Jung met, and then to have them transform, you know, because there was a sort of, let's be honest, I mean, I don't know if anybody here has ever read the Bible, but it does sound a little bit holier than thou. I mean, it's just sort of like, what are you people doing? Do you not know I will make you some wine? You know, it's kind of like, okay, dude, just like, come on, you know, like, I believe you're the real deal, and you don't have to talk to me like that. And then and then, yeah, but then he gets brought down, and then he gets returned as a gardener. I think that is the essence of the story that gets lost. That's not a martyred story. That's I think the most beautiful story. You know, it's a stunning story, and I think it's a story that we lack in our culture, especially around these times. yeah, I'll just say it, where I would say there's an all-out, well, cancellation is big is what I'll say. So, and so I'd like to give a different context for that and what it means to be canceled and then to be brought down and then what happens down there and then what can happen in the return. You know, I do like this title of Eckhart Tolle's book, The New Earth, and I think that's a beautiful vision, this new earth. And we talk here a lot about building the new mandala, and there's you know, how do you build this mandala that isn't built on scarcity and lack, that then has an arising of greed, hatred, and delusion as a result? And then you know, how do you build a mandala based in joy? Like really, like what ground would you have to build that on, and what would have to happen? And you already have this existing grumpy mandala, and you know, and it's a very we'll say determined mandala. We'll say it's invested, a deeply invested, you know, mandala. So much so that, you know, the core builders are very effective, and so you'd have to have, you know, in this one you have to have people believing not only in insufficiency but in their own insufficiency, and in that insufficiency you would have them have to believe that there is an outside authority that they must rely on in order to know the truth for themselves. And in doing so, that would have people lose the center, so that untruth could proliferate. And you know, I'm going to tell, well, I probably won't have time to tell the 9,000 stories I have, but you know, I moved to, so I went to Temple University, and it was a great school, and then I became fascinated with semantics. Semantics is really the study of meaning in language, and it's the bridge. It's the linguistic Buddhism. So what you focus on is how to have a language, how to have a style of communication that's steeped in impermanence, that doesn't reify this in such a way that the mind can't think in such a way that you're thinking in accord with reality. And so you begin to shift your way of speaking and thinking and seeing and languaging reality so that it's dynamic. One of the things, a key book is Language and Thought and Action by S.I. Hayakawa. And I just love this. So much so that everyone who knows me knows this, but he refers to, excuse me, you know, reality is a swirling mass of atoms. And I couldn't say that I would be like, swirling mass of atoms. I did that for the longest time. And, but a swirling mass of atoms. And so how do you have a language that begins to address that? And, you know, there was a big movement, there was a big political movement with my semantics friends to change to no longer have the to be, you know, the verb to be, or is, because is reifies things. It didn't go that far, you know. But so I went to San Francisco State for two reasons. That was one, but the other is that I was an activist in the extreme. I was an activist because at that time, the best that I had was the idea that the best activism you could have would be to add on, and this is really important, an additional identity of activist. And then from there, begin to take on activist activities. And it was from a, I would say, a clean heart, but not enough wisdom. And so, you know, when we talk about Buddhism, we talk about this idea that Buddhism flies on the wings of wisdom and compassion. And I had a lot of compassion, but not a lot of wisdom. And so what happened was, and so San Francisco State was known as the most radical. It was known as the guerrilla activist school. UC Berkeley was the more noble activist. They had very refined marches, and we took our shirts off, and we took back the night, is what that one was called. And then we did ridiculous things. It was also very much the home of ACT UP, if anybody's familiar with that. So ACT UP was the group of activists, the guerrilla activists who, who knows? Who knows the effect we had? But I left at a certain point because it went a little too guerrilla, but who were so deeply impacted by the influx of HIV into, I cry emotional, into San Francisco, that in a sense, we attempted to capture that rage, like lightning in a bottle, and turn it into a movement, because nobody knew what to do and nobody was listening. That's what was happening, All of a sudden, I at the time I identified as postmodern deconstructionist lesbian feminist. See, you want to talk about adding on identity. This was before I knew that all suffering is from identification, I had to go in the other direction, but I was just adding them on every day. And so being that, most of my friends were gay men, and so I can tell you that I worked at Sparky's. I don't know if anybody knows this, but it was a diner, and it was really the hub of San Francisco in a lot of ways. And all of my managers were, except for one, were gay men, and my friends were gay men. And I can tell you what it was like, going into work and all of a sudden noticing, the purple mark on someone's face, somebody I didn't know who was HIV positive, and friend after friend after friend, and that concentration of suffering that was so unbearable that it felt like the only option was to have it erupt, was to have it explode. And that's really how I think ACT UP was formed. And so again, I would say pure heart, perhaps not enough wisdom in some of the things that happen. And when I say not enough wisdom, what I mean is an activity that might have you become what you're opposing. And that to me isn't skillful, but I didn't know better, and it did move the needle in some ways. So who knows? I don't think that there would be. I think in most movements there is a the Black Panther side and the Martin Luther King side, and I think we assume one is better or worse, and I think both move us forward eventually. But so at that time, what happened was I'm a postmodern deconstructionist, lesbian feminist, and I'm in my semantics class, and I had a little rupture. And that rupture was that a man started flirting with me, and I don't know that everybody needs to know this, but I'm going to tell you. And I was having some lesbian bed depth, and I am. Well, you can probably tell I'm a woman. I got anyway a lot activated at one point, but I was a feminist. So I was incredibly dismissive of this man, and talked to him with a great deal of disdain, because that was what it meant to be a feminist at that time. And here he was doing a lot of feminist classes, because my semantics professor, who he had taught Zen in Japan, Dean Barland, just gave us all unbearable challenges. And so this man had said, you know, I want to make great change in the world. And he's, you know, he's this white, good-looking guy. And so he said, so Dean said, oh, great, take a semester of all women's studies classes. And so he was the only guy in there. And which I liked. You know, he told me I was arguing with my lesbian bed death lover, and he said, sleep on the other side of the bed. And really, he was just so good at switching things up in such a way, you know, because sleep is such a fundamental thing. And then to change sides of the bed, that's my side. And but doing it in such a way that you really began to notice shifts, you know. So what happened was, all of us in my activism world were deeply identified with what we were doing. And we were all honestly in a great deal of pain. And there was this feeling that we were, there was an aggression. And we weren't very nice to each other. And there were a lot of explosions. And I didn't know what to do. And this man who was flirting with me over here invited me to the Zen Center. And I remember, so I went. And I you know, I remember my knees broke. I remember a whole series of things. I remember, you know, I'm very spiritually, I'm not a spiritually coordinated person. I'm just not, I'm just like, oh my God, I go to Nyingma Plyul Temple in Queens, and you know, you have to walk in, you have to do the prayers and get on the floor, and I just like walk in and kind of sneak and go past, that's not my thing. That's not my thing. Like, if you want deep level practice and devotion, great, but if you want forms and postures, I can't do it. And so I remember, you know, I was just like trying to sneak in behind him, and this woman said this really cool thing to me. I couldn't figure out which table to sit at lunch, and I just kind of froze, and she said, oh, it looks like you're caught between this and that. I think that was such a really cool thing to say. It stayed with me. And so anyway, I went and I sat. And this is what I remember. I remember thinking, well, first of all, I remember feeling like I was betraying all of my activist friends because I wasn't angry in that moment. It was like, you know, I'm a great fan of Kuan Yin, and that energy just, oh my gosh, and it was like these cooling waters came on my burning fires, and you know, and I wasn't crying for my friends that were passing, and I wasn't crying for my friends who were sick, and I started crying. I was a bad activist, and then I remember just this feeling of like there was so much congestion inside of me, and in that room I exhaled. This new reservoir opened, and all of a sudden it was like, I might not be that good at this yet, but I think this might be the reservoir I need if I'm going to actually continue the work and do the work effectively in the world. And that the outrage, the fuel of outrage was killing me, and it was killing all of the people that I was working with, and we were going down as fast as the people we were representing. And I didn't see this having sustainability and longevity. And it looked a little, you know, when you're kind of a guerrilla activist and you're sitting in a Zen center, you feel like, you feel like you've betrayed something fundamental. And it looks a little suburban, let's be honest. And it looks like these people don't have what it takes to be an activist. There's a whole series of things that were running through my mind at the time, but I also remember that I couldn't stop. It was like, I don't do it anymore. I used to do Bikram yoga, and I remember that feeling. when you get that first drink of water and they say, don't drink too much, and you're just like, I can't stop. You got to, and there was a dehydration and a burning of my interior self that needed cooling and that needed hydration that really at that time Zen brought for me. And so that's where I want to start on this. And here's where I wanted to start, because the next Eros Times is coming out, I think, on Friday. And I have a wonderful friend in Harlem who shared a preview with somebody who is a representative of something political. And their hit was this, and I do want to say, look. This person is actually very skillful who wrote this email, because I get a lot of emails. And being a semanticist, I know everything that's behind it. And I'm going to point to what are called slur words and purr words. Because one of the things that I think has to happen as we move forward in the application of activism, I'll put that down really quick, is it has to have the only activism that needs to happen is a wholeness. This needs to become whole, and then this becoming whole needs to recognize that what is between us connects us rather than separates us. And then this needs to recognize that what's between us connects us rather than separates us. And that needs to move outward. There is no other activism, is what I've discovered. And I was 25 and I'm 56 now. I love it. So how long? I don't know. That was a long time ago, right? Is that 31 years? 31 years ago. What I used to think was activism was an inadvertent creation of other. I had to separate myself to be an activist. I had to see a bad them, not a them who's trying to find happiness the same way I'm trying to find happiness. And they don't have their skills and I don't have my skills, and together we're lacking some skills. But if we come together, something becomes whole again. And what I learned is that the greatest and only activism for me, and all of you too, no, because you are me. No, joking, joke. Is intimacy, and I mention this often because it was so potent. Matthew Fox saying, if everyone could experience the grandeur and awe of nature, then we wouldn't have climate, whatever you want to call it. I don't use what's called a slur word, so I don't use climate crisis, because the energy of the word crisis activates a cortisol in my system that creates a reactivity that can't be in response to and can't be in loving care and tending to, and that actually separates me from a group of people who I need to be in connection with and in conversation with if we're going to make change. It can't be those assholes created climate crisis. It has to be those people with those views did this, and this person with this view did this, and how are we going to move forward together because we're in it together? Which doesn't, I don't know if you can tell, but it doesn't mean I'm naive. It doesn't mean I'm looking away. It doesn't mean that I'm endorsing anybody's behavior. It means looking deeper to the place where the solution exists. So I talk about Eros and the Eros Sutras, that all they are is the source code for how to create a new mandala, for how to invite each human being to be part of creating a mandala of connection and joy and uniqueness. That's the other part that I think is really vital. So they're agnostic, they're plug and play. So it's like, if you're an Orthodox Jew, you can create in this mandala. If you're a former gangbanger, Jay, who runs our prisons to monasteries program, you can create in the mandala too. If you're a Christian, if you're a Buddhist, all of us can do this together. So then what language do we have to speak, and how do we have to relate in order to do that? So the sutras go principles, then they go tumescence, which is sort of the nature of suffering, we'll say. It's the diagnostic and the solution. And then it goes into practice, and then it goes into application. I'm Sicilian, and I'm a heavy practitioner and activist. If it isn't applied, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care. I don't care how brilliant you are. I don't care. I'm a cave yogi. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I mean, I'm a well-dressed cave yogi, but it's like, I want to know what it's like in application. If you are a teacher and you tell me all about compassion, and we go out and I catch one little glimmer of a lack of compassion in you, I am not interested. Now, mind you, if you're a teacher and you don't talk about compassion and you don't have compassion, I don't care. What I care about is, are you a congruent human being who's in alignment with who you say you are? That's what matters to me. And I say this because one of our greatest allies has been a hardcore Republican lobbyist who I did not expect to be such a phenomenal ally, who actually has a different set of principles than I do, or did. And then we started dialoguing, and I discovered, oh my gosh, he has so much to teach me about liberty. I'm not, I was never a hardcore patriot. That's just not my thing. But he really introduced something about honor and duty and this idea of liberty, and I changed my life. Absolutely changed my life. So all of this is to say that the sutras exist to bring us to this place, and everything from the first principle to the last sutra, and to bring us to the place where the meek, those who are meeked to the Dharma or the truth, inherit the earth. That's the idea. And then how do you have that happen? And how do you understand and troubleshoot the various issues? See, this is what this book is. I'm not selling it. I'm not. That I don't make the money. But it is the guide for how to do it in ways that we don't anticipate, having done it for this many years. See, everyone thinks, when those privileged peoples stop being jerks, and the billionaire class gives up their money, then everything will be so great. I don't know if you've ever worked with marginalized people or disenfranchised people. There is an invisible set of handcuffs. There's golden handcuffs, and then there's invisible handcuffs. And the invisible handcuffs exist in such a way that in order to subsist in that environment, in that extreme, one's mind of powerlessness begins to actually become an armor and a protection against disappointment. So to say, no, actually, to women, I'll use women, the least charged of my, to say to women, look, You have the biological power of call. You actually have the superior quality within your body to move and influence all biologies in existence. And it's been this way since the beginning of time. All you have to do is learn, basically much of what's in Tibetan Buddhism about activating the bliss impulse. All you have to do is learn how to operate that, and you can begin to move the world out of greed, hatred, and delusion. It is incumbent upon you, and then to watch woman after woman after woman, not merely not pick up the mantle, but watch woman after woman vehemently reject her power and say, I do not think you understand my pain. Well, it's like, yeah, I'm like you, baby. We're similar. I understand, and let me tell you, I have my own issues of difficulty. I mean, look, right? I understand, but I also understand that if we're going to build this new mandala, we're going to build it from a ground of joy. That's where you got to start. That's where you got to start. That's the work. So how do you get a group of people who are so grooved into despair, grooved into outrage, grooved into separation, grooved into self-pity, grooved into powerlessness? I've been all of them. I understand. How do you wash out those grooves and see what we've been taught? And this, I'm going to say, God love masculine tradition, but what we've been taught, and I would say this masculine tradition arose in the absence of feminine tradition. This is not a finger pointing thing. This is because I did not bring my creative wisdom into the world to say, oh no, you don't get those grooves out by individually picking through the feces, is what I'm going to say. Like, you don't just like do each one. No. You can wash in with a certain joy, and it clears it. Trauma researcher Dan Kriegman, amazing human being, talks about the fact that our ideas about trauma are upside down. If you keep focusing on the trauma, the best you can get is to without symptoms, but you don't actually get to joy unless you increase the power of bliss and joy. That's how you do it. If you actually increase the joy, then the healing comes in the groundswell. Well, that's actually a feminine way, a feminine approach. But instead, we're like following these masculine protocols and killing ourselves as a result. Look for my op-ed on this, by the way. Okay, so here's what I wanted to say. So all of this is to say, we got this letter. Well written. I'm going to say that. Thoughtful. But there are some slur words in here. So slur words and purr words exist in a dualistic world to create the other so you feel you have meaning if you don't have meaning in yourself. So until each one of us individually knows our value, knows our eudaimonia, knows our purpose, knows what we're here to bring, until that happens, we're going to have to find our meaning in opposition to. Because if there is no fully formed me over here, I'm going to have to know myself either as compared to you or in opposition to you. This will never bring peace. This will never bring peace. Wholes bring peace. And wholes can afford to be unique as well, which is so great because we are. And so then you're actually operating in accord with nature. So slur words and purr words, this is again in erotic justice, the left and the right, dark and light, all of these things, they create each other. They're creating each other. There's a great, yes? How's that? Can you see me now? Okay. Can you see me now? Can you see me now? Do I look good? There was an Instagram Bible, Instagram wisdom. No, there was an Instagram video. I can't find it again. I've asked people to find it. If anybody finds this, it was one of those great animation ones. They did this for something else. They did this for the guy who did the mindfulness study, Dan or someone. He had been a news reporter who had a breakdown, and then he, No, and then he studied mindfulness with the Spirit Rock people even. And then he wrote a book, and then the book had this animation. It's that kind of animation. So if you're looking, that's what you're looking for. So what this video did was it demonstrated how the left created the right and how the right created the left. And how the separation was creating the tension that held the two together, that gave the other meaning. Does this make sense? Am I good? Are we good? Slur words and purr words do that. And what they do is they lull the mind, or they flood the mind. So you lull the mind into, like the stunning example of this superstar who moved through the crowd with absolute grace. There's a lot of purr words in there, right? And you'll find those in a lot of political commentary. If people don't come down to the ground in terms of what to do, we talk about, semantic sanity is a concrete reality that is in accord with the abstract reality, and that there's a congruency going down, right? So you'll hear all of these big promises up here, and you'll be like, oh my God, healthcare for everybody, oh my God. And then you'll realize, like, whatever it is a year into, no more climate change ever again, and food on every table. And then you'll kind of realize, like, but they haven't actually told you how they're gonna get there. So it's like that. That's what a slur word will do. You're just falling asleep at the vision or the dream. Forget it. I was just thinking, I watch too much Instagram. Apparently, I don't even watch that much of it. But I want to know what's happening in the world. And so you hear these women talk about, like, these guys that pick them up and the lines they use, And it's like there's a lot of purr words in those lines and not a lot of application, right? So, and then slur words are words that trigger cortisol in you, and the cortisol cascades in the brain and you can't hear anymore. Cult is one of those words, by the way, everyone. But there are certain words that when you use them, people get so triggered that their own viewpoints are so activated that they can't think. And Trump is very good at using these words and getting people to go unconscious in the middle of a debate, And so if you watch it more objectively, you can see how these types of words are employed in order to, I would say, continue the collective trance of dualism. And people don't even realize that they're carriers. So it's well written in the beginning. Maybe you can illuminate me on how this approach of having a foundation of joy as our political activism, seeks to deal with the other thing is, if you are not aggrieved and outraged, you're often considered a naive child, right? That's another reason why I wrote Erotic Justice, is because I want it to be really clear. No. So what I'm hearing you say is, in all of your outrage, this, and I'm still going to say, your proposed solutions don't work, have never worked, will never work. Why don't we try these? So And there's a way, and maybe you can hear this, that diminishment would seek to silence the person speaking of something so trivial as joy, as human connection. So with the actual things, that's one of those slur words, believe it or not, coming for humanity in the real world in a short time frame. Global climate catastrophe, possible nuclear war, the horrific conditions and treatment of immigrants forced to crisscross the world in search of a place to live. And in the period of this next election, the determination of the fascist Republicans to fully lock in their power, whether by rigging election, civil war, or coup. What I want to say is that if those things happen, this is going to be really controversial, this will be part of the reason why. Because it is virtually impossible for critical thinking, for executive functioning to occur with that type of language coming at it. Fortunately, all of my training is to be able to stay conscious there, to understand how this human being is feeling the same suffering I was feeling when I was seeing my friends dying. Like it's not, it's a pure heart that feels that way, that doesn't yet have effective methods for how to begin to make long-term sustainable change. And this is the part that nobody likes. This is the part where my original editor on this book wouldn't work with me because he thought I did not see the crisis we were in. What I said to him, we're still friends, by the way, but he's like a lefty Woodstock guy. It was really far out of his range. What I said to him was, there once was a surgeon, and this surgeon had to do the heart transplant, the first heart transplant. He had 12 hours to do what would take a 24-hour surgery. It was virtually impossible. Does this make sense? Without brain damage to the person he was doing it. And somebody said, how are you going to do it? How? What you're looking to do is impossible. And he said, does anybody know? I'll go slow to go fast. And that's what we have to begin to employ, in my mind, in our activism, is a deep slowness, a patience, human care. I do not know how we're going to save humanity without humanity in our saving. It's going to have to be that we bring this kindness to each other and this slowness. And then what begins to happen is, it's not me and my rage that has to have a revolution. It's us moving forward, clear on the obvious issues that we need to amend. And here's what we're going to discover. I think I'm almost, let me see, what time is it? Okay. I think what we'll discover, so what I said to my editor also is, he said something like, it's so serious. It's all serious. That's kill people. No. And I said, yeah, it's so serious. We can't afford to just keep mowing the lawn. We have to get it up by the root. And that's going to take some time, and that's going to take collective connection for us to do that. And so how do you do that? Well, this is the challenge that most people don't like, because it's going to have to be that each person determines to find realization with themselves. Because if you have a group of people, say all of us today, decide to do everything right? We do everything, and we're important people, and we do everything right. But you don't change the minds of the people who created the problems. You will recreate problems of the same magnitude or even greater. You have to change the minds, the hearts, the souls of the people who created the problems. So, for example, if you have greed, you have this ridiculous consumption in the world. It's because humans feel a certain emptiness, certain loneliness, a certain need to fill a hole, a certain insufficiency. Well, that is not going to be filled with anything, and it's certainly not going to be filled with do-gooding or being virtuous. It just won't work. If it worked, remember, this is salt of the earth practice. If it worked, we'd be doing it. But what I found, the only thing that works is, this is so funny, the cure for that hole in your soul is emptiness. But it's like, the only thing that actually works is touching into something that is so beyond sufficiency, that is so mind-blowingly beautiful, that is so fulfilling, that you don't need to look outside of yourself, that it's not, you aren't practicing any kind of restraint. It's not even interesting. You know, I have my little temple in my little house in Harlem. I love my temple, you know, I love it. Thank you to those who were willing to paint it gold for me. And like, I don't want to leave my temple. I don't, or I want to come here. Those are the two places that I want to be. But I don't need trips, because I take trips. And these trips are far superior to those other trips, right? And then you think about hatred. Well, you know, hatred, watch yourself this week and notice when you feel hatred, because hatred begins with holding your breath. Holding your breath begins because you're overextended. Anybody who does yoga knows this, right? You extend your pose further than you can go, and you hold your breath, and you feel angry. It just happens. Well, the whole world right now is overextended because they have an idea of insufficiency, that there isn't enough, there's this hole in the soul, so they're working harder in order to fill this hole. Well, so wow, we just solved greed and hatred, and then delusion, well, that's at the core of it, right? And the delusion is this idea that this fundamental sense of insufficiency can be remedied in any way by anything out here. Although it can be, I do want to say human connection is a profound healing salve. I want to make that. But that there isn't, that each of us isn't born with the cure inside. You know, that's really the illusion. And the cure that's inside is to let go of the contraction that believes there's a me. That's all. It's like, that's the cure for everything. You're holding your breath, you're holding your muscles, you let them go, and you feel better. And you just do that throughout the whole of your life, and it's all right. That's about what it boils down to. So, anyway, I thought I would end on this little story. I'm going to read my Pema quote again, because Pema killed it on this quote. Times are difficult globally. Awakening is no longer a luxury or an ideal. It's becoming critical. We don't need to add more depression, more discouragement, more anger to what's already here. It's becoming essential that we learn how to relate sanely with difficult times. The earth seems to be beseeching us to connect with joy and discover our innermost essence. This is the best way we can benefit others. Okay, I'm just going to read this one part here, I think. What the heck? I don't even know what it says. Oh, that's a good one too. One is about psychedelics, one is about Om, who knows? I don't roam too far from my various locations. So I just had my first Om. This is me walking home. After the experience, I walked home through the twisted moon-bathed streets of San Francisco. I walked through the November chill of the Mission District with the half-naked junkies with fresh violet and blue smears of bruises on their arms and legs. They looked as if they had lain in a mosquito den and been well eaten. The cholos, with their plaid flannel shirts buttoned up, their Ben Davis pants and 32-ounce beers in the brown paper bags, the old woman trying to make her way home with her cart, her eyes locked on the destination. That would mean she had made it one more day through the war zone that was her neighborhood. A background of salsa music coming from both neighborhood bars and lowriders that would bump themselves up with hydraulics and then drop down a display of what a vehicle can do. I'd made this trek so many times, but I'd never before made this trek. The scene usually consisted of a performative me, stealing myself into my coat, head more or less down, but not too down, lest I reveal my fear, the otherness I felt. The music would annoy the chaos of men drunk and staggering onto my path, the glare of the corner stores, the hunger that issued from every eye I inadvertently caught, a plea that were I with infinite resources could not fulfill. The overwhelming sense that this was all too much and there would never be enough, and at the same time. The pain was both ubiquitous and had substance, enough to position me in a stance of subtle recoil, not so subtle contraction, as an attempt to diminish the surface area that came into contact with this obvious suffering. My most spiritually ambitious intention of being a magnanimous force of loving kindness collapsed in on itself at the first overwhelming scent of urine or dope sickness that issued from that back alley. On this night, as one might walk in the shared bath of moonlight, I walked with an incandescence. By the way, I'm speaking of being turned on or lit up or having touched emptiness, we'll say. On this night, as one might walk in the shared bath of moonlight, I walked with an incandescence from within that shone outward, and wrapping its arms, suffusing everything, I perceived with this light what had prior appeared ugly, distorted, unruly, the way a foreign language first sounds. I now had within me the Rosetta Stone to translate, and the nuance, the depth, beauty, and meaning revealed themselves. The mind that sought for the problem, the threat, and would fix any perception of such, and there was no lack, dissolved into a deeper mind with a different faculty that could perceive an unutterable beauty with things just as they are. There seemed to be an interaction where not only was beauty being perceived, it was being conferred. The street animated in this perception, inviting me into the interior, not as distant viewer with space between, with room to judge what I saw and what was seen, but as part of an intimacy so great that it felt like the stream of breath on my neck. Another lightning flash. This is love.
Thank you, Nicole. That was beautiful. And then we have time for a few reflections, so we can take 2 from the room and then 2 online. Patricia.
Patricia. Hi. I am so grateful for the distinction of per and slur. Oh my God. And I confess to having at times called it climate crisis. No more. And I mean, something I see is that they're both extremes, and sometimes we need to we think we need to use an extreme in order to get ourselves heard. So I'll be looking for other ways.
From my heart, thank you.
That was beautiful. I especially appreciated the email story that you talked about, and how you've developed the ability to see through the language that the person's using to then be able to meet them where their heart is and recognize the intention. And I just think it's a powerful lesson for me to learn how to meet everybody as an ally, and so thank you.
And then online, whose hand is that? Michael. Hi, Michael.
Michael Lesser.
Hello, hi. I appreciated the reminder that being brought down is it's a benefit to it, and just recently working with a lot of the people in Harlem, doing AOS and AOA, being able to see that in a new light, and actually being able to transmit and see them that way, that what's happened to them is a benefit to their lives. And it's such a beautiful message, and it really is transformative when someone can actually look at themselves that way and see the benefit of being humbled like that.
Thank you so much, Michael. And last one, Joe. Hi, Joe.
I'm unmuting. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Joe.
Yeah, when you were talking about people who walk their walk and like if they show up incongruent to what they're preaching, and then try to like continue preaching it, and you can feel that, and you're like, oh, it's just not right. But what I notice when I listen to you is I feel your congruence, and I feel like even when you talk.
Joe, you're frozen.
Oh no.
Even when you talk?
Yeah, maybe you can hear me talk. So
yeah, we can hear you now.
So it's just lovely. It's lovely to feel you, because I can feel that congruence, and it does the opposite of the crisis word. It actually puts my body at peace and realizes that I can be open to it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Joe. Okay, and then that's all the time we have for the Sutra study portion. Before I hand you guys over to Aubrey to do the closing dedication, I also, I'm looking over here, to let you know that Nicole has talked a lot about building the mandala, and we do have a course, a program coming up next year on really how to become an erotic artist to co-create this mandala that we're building out in the world. And so we have an open house for that on September 15th, that's this Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific. And so if you're interested in the program, please come to the open house. And then I give us Aubrey to take us out.
Our dedication. We dedicate our excellence, our resourcefulness, our creativity, and our resilience to the building of the mandala and the awakening of the feminine pole. May all women everywhere recognize they are made of power and become willing to carry the weight of it, wielding it with joy for the mandala of humankind.
All right, that's a sutra study.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.